Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
This is your host, Alicia Dibrell from Insight Media, and today I get the privilege to interview Bob Wiley. He is a team leader of the Wiley Group of Keller Williams Legacy Metropolitan, serving the Baltimore and surrounding counties. Wiley and his team help anybody needing assistance with a real estate transaction. That includes first-time home buyers, move-up buyers, and those looking to downsize. So they don't only just help buyers, they also help on the seller side. So if you're looking to maybe move up or just make another purchase or an investment, or maybe you were left a property that by a family member, they could also help you out with that. In addition, his team is a member of the KW Luxury Division, serving homes in the $500,000 range and above. Bob's years of experience and dedication to his clients makes this for a great interview. So without further ado, I want to welcome Bob Wiley to the show.
Thanks very much, Alicia.
You're welcome. It's a privilege to have you here on the show. I appreciate you taking the time out. So let's get right down to it. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from?
I was born in Baltimore. I've lived here my entire life. I schooled all through Baltimore, graduated from the University of Baltimore with a degree in marketing. I've been in retail sales. I've been in radio sales, corporate sales. I worked for the Baltimore Orioles for 3 seasons. I've traveled quite a bit with my wife. I've been to Africa at one point when I visited my eldest son, who was in the Peace Corps. My wife and I went to Italy on our honeymoon, and in addition, traveled quite a bit throughout the United States. Gave us a good perspective on real estate throughout the world, and I really enjoy real estate now.
What made you decide to get into real estate?
Actually, my wife was an agent at the time and had been for about 8 years. My sister and I had 3 rental properties that we had acquired, and was developing an interest that way. In 2010, I left the Orioles after the last day I received my real estate license, and then we started our team. So we have been growing our team for the past 6 years.
And so can you tell me, who do you help and how do you help them?
When I got into real estate, it was really the bottom of the cycle. The 2005-06 bubble had burst. The market was trending downward and through 8 and 9. So in 2010, when I got in, we were at the bottom. We were pretty much at the bottom of the market. So that gave me a lot of experience. At the time, you really could not move up. You couldn't sell and move up because the market had moved down so far that pretty much the only people that were buying houses were first-time buyers. A lot of people at the time, just walked away from their properties and left them to the bank, or they were doing a lot of short sales. My wife became a short sale expert, so we did a lot of that. But on the buyer's side, it was really a lot of first-time buyers. So I really spent my time perfecting my skills as a first-time buyer agent. I got accredited as a accredited buyer's representative. Really just to improve my skills negotiating and learn better strategies for representing buyers. Today, a lot of those buyers are moving up, so I'm getting more experience with helping them buy and then sell right behind, because the timing can be very tricky, so you have to be very careful with that.
Yeah, because that would leave you with 2 homes at the same time. If you have,
yes,
if you're in the middle of that definitely is tricky and probably takes some experience in the industry to know how to avoid as much as possible.
Correct.
So what should a home buyer consider before making a decision to buy their first home? It's a big one. So, what should they consider beforehand?
Well, I would think the most important thing is really just to make sure they're ready to take on the responsibility of home ownership. People live either with their parents or they live with roommates. They rent in an apartment building. They really don't have to worry about the day-to-day hassles that come along with owning a home. So I would certainly make sure they're prepared for that. Of course, they have to have a good job. They have to have good credit. So, if they're preparing for that, you really should be in your solid position for at least a year minimum. 2 years would be best. And of course, you got to have cash reserves. It's, a lot of times today, sellers are subsidizing the buyers for closing costs, but that's not going to last forever. At some point, it will become a stronger seller's market, and buyers are going to have to make sure they have all their costs themselves.
Okay, so then if that's what they should be considering, what should their main focus be on when buying their first home?
I'd say the main thing is to make sure you're purchasing a property in a neighborhood that trends upward in value. You certainly don't want a neighborhood that is undervalued and the trend seems to be going in a downward direction. So, if you're going to be investing in a property in 5 to 10 years, you want to make sure that it's worth more than when you purchase it. So that would be the big thing. The other thing I'd say is make sure ready, as I said before, for the unexpected expenses. You could get into a property and have to have the furnace or the air conditioning unit replaced in several years. So you want to make sure you have some cash reserves for unexpected expense.
And what are the options as far as types of properties to choose from?
There are many. There are, of course, single-family homes, townhomes, and row homes, as we call them in Baltimore City. You have condos. You have the detached properties. There are also co-ops. So there are a number of ownership type of properties that are available. You can purchase REO properties from the bank or an investment group. There are some short sale opportunities available. However, right now, I stress very strongly with my buyers to avoid short sales if at all possible, because the time frame on a short sale can be anywhere from a minimum of 60 days to we've had properties go as much as a year. And the buyer is just kind of holding on, waiting to see if they're going to get the property. And a lot of times what happens is the buyer finds another property that comes on the market and then says, oh, I've changed my mind. Can I get out of that deal and move on to this next one? And if you're still signed in for 60 days, you can't, unless you're willing to forego your earnest money deposit. So,
okay, I could definitely see how that could be a problem, and because of the long time that it takes to get that transaction completed. I totally see where you're coming from on that. So does a home buyer really need a real estate agent? Or, because there's Craigslist, there's Zillow, there's so many different websites where you could find a home. Does a buyer really need a real estate agent?
Yeah, I would say that there are homes every day that are transferred from the seller to a buyer without real estate agents involved. And provided nothing goes wrong, everything is smooth. But when there are times when there's a problem, it really helps to have an agent. There are, right now, the Maryland real estate contract is about 52 pages long. And if you're a buyer and you don't know what you're signing and you get yourself into something that you can't get out of, or you don't know how to structure the contract so that you know how to get out of it, then you can be in a lot of trouble. I've even had clients that were lawyers or had parents that were lawyers, and they always say, nope, this is what you guys do every day, you handle it. So, I would say for a buyer, there is really no reason not to have representation, especially when the other side has representation, because you want to make sure that if there are questions or if you're not giving up any of your own rights. And that's really kind of one of the more important things, that you're not giving up rights.
And what should a home buyer, what should they consider if they're choosing between several different real estate agents? What are some things that they should consider before they decide who they want to work with? Because it's kind of a major decision.
Absolutely. That's a great question. I strongly suggest you interview agents, just like you were interviewing someone for a job. If you're interviewing a nanny for your child, I would say sit down with them, ask them. We actually have a number of questions that we give. When I do an interview with a buyer, I have a couple of questions that I give my buyer if they are interviewing another person as to, things to ask them. One of them would be example. Are they experienced? How many houses how many transactions have they done representing buyers? Do they have any further experience or education as accreditation for working with buyers? I'd say the biggest thing is to make sure that it's a good personality match. And I tell my buyers that, hey, if we go out the first time and you really don't like my personality or how I, handle the visitation of the properties, then decide pretty much right then. And it really only takes an email to say, Bob, look, we've decided to go in a different direction. Thanks very much. And even though we've entered into a contract, it can be terminated that quickly.
And what do you think makes you so successful with working with new home buyers?
I would say that it's because I've been taught to use systems right from the beginning with Keller Williams. They teach you that systems and procedures are really important. So I work with my buyers. I tell them right from the beginning when we have our buyer's consultation, that takes about an hour and 15 minutes, and almost to the minute, that's what it takes. And then when we start visiting properties, I developed a system where I try to keep the property straight in their minds. I always ask them after each property, okay, so if you had to buy a house today, would this be a property you would consider? And if the answer is no, then that property's gone. Keep it out of their mind. If the answer is yes, then that becomes our number one. So then as we go to the next house, it's a very simple question again. Would this house replace the number one or not? And if it does, then that's our new number one, and the last house is out. And that way, it's very difficult for people to keep 2 and 3 properties in their mind at one time. Oh, I like this about this house. I like this about this property, and on and on. So if they're just focused on one, then we know, when we find that right house. And almost inevitably, when we walk into that property that really hits all of their must-haves, as we say, it's a 3-bedroom, it's a 2-bath, it has the yard, it's a detached property at the end of a street or things like that. They almost know inevitably that, what, I think this is the property. Sometimes even before we walk in the door, they know that.
And I'm sure the expression on their face definitely, helps you out as a real estate agent.
Oh, absolutely.
You can kind of tell.
Absolutely.
So what is your job? You're a real estate agent. What exactly do you do? What is your job in that transaction?
Real strictly speaking, my job is to represent either the buyer or the seller to the best of my ability to ensure that their investment, either if it's an investment in purchasing a house or if it's in selling the house, to represent them to the best of my knowledge. With sellers, our job is to sell the property for the most amount of money in the least amount of time, with the least amount of hassle as well.
And what kind of fees are involved when using a real estate agent?
If you're a buyer, the only fee would be a transaction fee, or what we call a broker commission. This fee typically covers the compliance officer reviewing the file to make sure it's complete and complies with all the state laws. It also covers maintaining the file. So we have many different formats, and we have storage on the cloud. We have, of course, our hard copy backup on the computer, external hard drive. So we store it a number of different ways just in case anything were to happen. And down the road, up to 7 years, if you were to get audited, we have all your files. The other thing is my commission is paid by the buyer, by the seller. So always keep that in mind, that without a buyer, I tell this to my buyers, that even though the seller technically pays my commission, for me, I keep in mind that without my buyer, there is no transaction. There are no funds to be paid. So even though technically speaking, my buyer doesn't pay the commission, I do kind of keep that in the back of my mind. So I remember that my focus is on my client.
So what are some finance options available for first-time home buyers? And are there different loans for different types of properties?
All buyers pretty much have the same choices when acquiring a mortgage. The main difference for first-time buyers is that there can be discounts in the transfer and recordation tax. That is the way it is in the state of Maryland. Other states may have different discounts as well. There are lenders that offer programs for first-time buyers that they don't offer to that repeat buyer. They might include a discounted rate. They might include a special down payment requirement. In some jurisdictions like Baltimore City, we have programs for first-time buyers. They do require the buyer to take a counseling class. This would be typically an all-day class, and then to have a one-on-one with a counselor. There are other loans for properties. There's what's called a 203K renovation loan. This is available through pretty much any lender, and that would be for a property that requires renovation prior to occupying the property. For example, they would close on the property, they would begin the renovation, and then when that's complete, then they actually get to move into the property. And there's some strict rules for that, but it's definitely an option with as many distressed properties as there are out there. There are also specific loans for if you're buying a lot or a piece of land and intend to build a property on it. There are certainly special loans for USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, if you're buying a farm. That's pretty much the main ones, and there just may be specific ones for a lender that you use.
So if I was buying a condo or a home with some kind of association attached to it, what are some things I should be aware of, or the rules? Do they have rules on rehabs? Tell me what a home association is and what's all involved with it.
Well, there are condo associations, there are homeowner associations, and then, of course, there are community associations, and all have different levels of requirements and restrictions. The HOA and condo associations, they probably have the strictest regulation. They can control what color you paint the house. They can control whether you can put a fence up, how high it has to be, what color it has to be, all the way down to homeowner associations, which are really just for the community kind of stay together as a group, maybe have a all-day event that the association sponsors. But generally speaking, homeowner associations don't have that much power over you. The thing that is important to know with condos and HOAs is that you do get a period of time, and that varies from state to state, on to review the association bylaws, to review their banking practices and what exactly they control. So if you were to buy a property and after you've gone under contract, now you review the condo documents and you don't agree or decide not to move forward with the property, every contract in the state of Maryland has the provision for you to get out of it with just that, with just that change. So that's really the things you need to know, that there is a safeguard built in that allows you to get out if there's something really restrictive that you don't want. Like, for example, you say, well, we have a camper. Well, they don't allow campers to be parked in the neighborhood. Well, we can't buy the house then, so you have the option to get out of the transaction.
That's really good to know, because if you are, in that kind of position, or let's just say you want to, rehab your house and redo the paint color on the outside or whatever it is, or maybe put up a fence and they won't allow you to, but that's, what you want to make it yours. At least it does, there is an option for you to get out of that transaction. So that's really, really
right.
Good to know.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So what do you find to be important when considering which neighborhood to live in?
Well, that really depends on your specific needs. Most families are looking for great schools. They're looking for safe neighborhoods. They're looking for neighborhoods that maybe have a high walkability score. They want to be able to walk to the grocery store, or they want to be able to, have other amenities around. Safety, I think, is probably number one for most clients. Again, with all real estate, you have to be very careful, and really it's up to the buyer to investigate the local police statistics to see what kind of crime is in the area. I mean, let's face it, pretty much everywhere has some crime. And, the level of crime that you're comfortable with, varies from person to person. So I would say drive around the neighborhood during the day, drive around the neighborhood on weekends, drive around in the evening, and see if you see the kind of neighborhood that you believe you and your family would feel comfortable living in. And then and most people have that sense that they know that's what their responsibility is.
So how many homes should a new home buyer look at before making a decision?
Well, I would say that as many as it takes for you to feel comfortable and confident that you've made the right choice, that you can live there for 5 to 10 or longer. So when I take buyers out, as I said, my system, I try to keep their focus on exactly what we're looking for. A lot of times I'll have buyers say, can we see this house? And I'll say, well, it really doesn't match your criteria. I know, but I just want to see it. Well, depending on the situation, you may see that or not. But in an effort to not waste time, I try to keep them focused on the houses that meet their criteria. Now, that being said, that can take 6 or 10 homes. It could take 15 or 20 homes. It really depends on how specific their needs are and then what's the general market of availability.
And so once a home buyer likes a house, what's next?
Well, what I tell my buyers is that I will be as patient with them as is necessary for them to find the right home. However, if we find the right home, we may leave right from there and go directly back to the office and write the offer. The last thing we want is to be negotiating with another buyer. We want to be negotiating with the seller. So if it means that we have to drive directly back to the office, write up the offer and get it over to the agent because we fear that other buyers may be interested in that particular property, then that's what we'll do. And I think that's also a sign with your agent, if you choose an agent, that they're willing to do that, that they're willing to be reactive and active so that you don't lose the home. I mean, it could cost you several $1,000s if you get into a negotiation with another buyer. That certainly you don't want that.
So how does let's just say, okay, how does the entire transaction? What's the process of it? So we make an offer. Now what?
Okay, we make an offer, and then once we get fully under contract and it's ratified, then the next thing we do is as we have been going along, we've had the lender involved. So the lender probably already has most of the documents needed to approve your loan. But if not, then we get you fully approved in front of the lender so that lending process can move along quickly. We next conduct a home inspection with a licensed home inspector to really do a full review of the house so that the buyer is comfortable with the house, to look out for any issues that might be there, whether they are readily viewable by the buyer or something that may be, that only a home inspector might find out, like the electrical outlets are wired improperly or the plumbing, something might be wrong with the plumbing, things like that. The inspector can't look behind the walls, but he can look at the way the work is done and give an evaluation as to whether something might need further investigation. So after the inspection, we are going to request from the seller a number of repairs. I've had that list be 2 items. I've had that list be 28 items, and it all depends on the property. After that, it's the buyer's responsibility to continue along with the lender to make sure that the transaction isn't held up. The title company will begin their work to research the title of the property to make sure that there are no encumbrances, and that gets done in a timely fashion so that we can close on time. After that, things that are also going on behind the scenes is there's usually a termite pest inspection done on the property. There's, of course, an appraisal done on the property to make sure that it meets the value that the buyer is paying. And so really it requires a number of teams of people moving at the same time, all in the same direction.
Okay, so tell me, what is a closing and how would a first-time home buyer know what to do at one?
Yeah, that's a good question. And they don't. They typically don't know what to do. It's really not that complicated. The actual closing in the state of Maryland, everything closes and the transaction is complete after we leave the room. And there are other states where they do what's called an escrow closing, where they sign and then it takes generally up to 30 days for the property to be transferred. But in the state of Maryland, we all sit down at the table. The buyer on one side, the seller on the other. Usually both agents are there, and a closing, either attorney or a closing agent, conducts the closing, has the seller sign all the documents, transferring the deed over to the new owner. The buyer signs the new deed as well, signs documents for the bank. If there are any special programs that the buyer got, then they sign documents for that. And when we're all done, the buyer gets the keys and they can move in right away.
Okay, how long does that process take?
Usually about an hour to 2 hours, depending on how many documents the bank requires. But usually an hour to 2 hours is a normal closing time.
So tell me, what is the biggest mistake you see new home buyers making when buying their first home?
I would say it's that they want to buy a fixer-upper. We're going to buy a house that we're going to work on while we're living there. And they get into the property and they didn't really realize how much work it needs. And we had a lot of that because we had so many distressed properties in the market that people were buying properties that were livable, but that they wanted to fix up, and they find out that they probably would have been better served by just saving money a little bit longer and buying a property that was in better condition. That would be probably the one thing I would say that happens most often. Sometimes you buy properties that are really cheap and, it needs all new wiring, or it needs all new plumbing, or it needs a new roof. And, there are other issues that are going on. You can evaluate these things going in, but sometimes you don't know the true extent of the damage until, you rip some walls down and whatnot.
Okay. So if you had one piece of advice for somebody just starting out, what would that be?
Well, I would say it's twofold. One, obviously, take some counseling. Do one of the first-time buyer counseling programs. They're really good. They're very informative. I, as am associated with the one counseling agency right in Baltimore City, the Southeast CDC, and I go in and I talk to the buyers, and I have about an hour to go through things, and the questions are always the same. Basically all the questions that you've asked today are really what they ask a lot of. So that's a really good thing. And then I would say find yourself a good agent. Find someone that comes highly recommended. Find someone that you can trust, that maybe a close friend has used, or definitely interview the agent. Sit down and make sure your personalities are compatible.
So what do you think is the biggest myth or misconception people have when buying a home?
I would say that today, at least in 2016, the market, that they still think there are deals out there that we're going to offer $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 less for the home. As the market was driving down, that was the case. But as the market stabilized through 2014 and 15, and even this year, it's just not the case. You don't have the leverage to drive the seller's price down that much. So that would be the one thing. I would say there are still properties out there that are overpriced, and make sure that your agent knows how to properly evaluate a good price for the property. I've had properties where we've had the appraisal come in $5,000 to $10,000 over, but that rarely happens. I use basically a cost per square foot. I find properties that are comparable in the condition, and then basically look at the cost per square foot. So if we're looking at one property that's 2,000 square feet compared to a property that's 2,500 square feet, but they're both the same price, well, then there's a difference. Certainly the smaller property can't say, well, my house is worth the same because we're in the same neighborhood. But when you evaluate it on cost per square foot, then you're able to go back to the seller and say, here's why we're offering you less money, because you have less room than this other house, even though you're comparable condition. So I would say, make sure you do that and that your agent does that. And the other myth I would say is that interest rates are going to stay this low forever. I believe that buyers have become numb to these low interest rates, and they just think, well, I don't have to buy now. I'll just wait and buy later. Well, we've already seen interest rates move up into the 4 range. And with the Federal Reserve meeting, that could happen, and they could move up again. So the long-term evaluation is that through 2017 and 18, rates will move back up to 5 and maybe even above 5, depending on the rest of the economy.
That's good to know. It's good to be prepared for, because you're right. You always think the interest rates are going to stay low because they've been low for quite a few years here. Right.
Yeah, I know the first house I bought, I paid 12.5% interest. And that was quite high. They went from there up to 18% at one point. And now if you go to a mortgage calculator and look at how much house you can buy at 18% interest and look how much house you can buy at 4% interest. And it's a significant difference.
That's probably depressing. So tell me this, how could home buyers, or whether they want to sell a home or buy a home, but how would they find out more about you and how you can help them? How would they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. They can go to our website, and that is real simply the Wiley Group. So www.thewileygroup.co. And there is no M on at the end there. That's a different company, but we are just .co. The other way would be to look on our Zillow reviews. We have probably about 56 or 57 Zillow reviews, which they're welcome to review. They want to look through all 57 of them. Feel free. They can certainly email me, and my email address is R1 Wiley, WILEY, @kw.com. And all of my contact information is on the website as well. So if they have any questions, they go to the website. They can find one way to contact me, whether it's cell phone or email.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. This was great information. I think it helps not only first-time home buyers, but pretty much anybody looking to buy a home. You had some great information. I really appreciate your time today.
You're very welcome. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, this was definitely fun. All right, guys, this is your host, Alicia Dibrell from Insight Media. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.